Good evening. Welcome to the Midnight Binge Podcast, a show about the best Netflix content in the known universe. I'm your host, Migs, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about episodes 6 through 10 of Cursed, wrapping up our three-part series on the show. So let's get started. All right, so we finally arrive at part 3 and the final part of our review of Cursed. This took forever, so I apologize for my ramblings and lengthy and over-explained take on the show. But as I mentioned in my episode number 1 or part 1 of this series, this is all new to me, so I'm just inventing it as I go. As you have noticed, I've been changing the styles episode to episode on how I go about reviewing the show because I'm not going to know what works for me until I try different things. So with this third and final part of our review of Cursed, I am going to be changing things up a little bit again. So in this installment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize episodes 6 through 10 based on storylines. So the thing about Curse, at least the second half of the show, I noticed when I was watching it, is that there's just storylines coming from every direction. And to try to explain in chronological order all of these storylines is basically just going to be what I did in episode 1 and be rambling of exactly everything that happened in order. Which is basically an audio version of Netflix, which isn't much fun if you already saw everything, unless you just really like the show and just want to hear it again. But, as I said, I'm figuring things out. So in this case, I'm going to start with where episode 6 takes off, which is episode 5 ends with Nemoi revealing that she's or discovering rather that she's Merlin's daughter. Now in episode 6, after she has her telepathic meeting with Merlin, she now has made arrangements to meet with him, or he has made arrangements for them to meet at this abandoned or destroyed castle, which we learn is called the Colzean Castle. Now, Nimue sets out with Kaze and Morgana. They're going to be escorting her over to meet Merlin. And one thing I did want to mention here is that Curse has some really awesome scenes where it's like Hollywood level, like Lord of the Rings level valleys, and it's just beautiful sceneries. Again, I'm really not sure what country this show was taped on, but it's amazing. They do some really cool flyover scenes of Nimue, Kaze, and Morgana just galloping with their on their horses, and it's really breathtaking. Now, we see in this storyline where Merlin is getting ready to go meet Nimue, as Nimue is making her way towards the castle, and he's left the Fae Fire hidden in the forest with the widow's horse. So, we're getting some thunder just in time for my recording. Awesome. Anyway, so as you can recall, Merlin was taken prisoner by Uther Pendragon's guards and brought to the castle. I figure he doesn't trust his belongings being safe there, so he leaves the Fae Fire with the widow's horse, and on his way to meet Nimue at the Colzean Castle, he picks up the Fae Fire from the horse and makes his way over there. Now, the first thing that Merlin tells Nimue when he sees her is that she looks just like Lenore, like her mother. It's obvious at this point that Lenore and Merlin had a relationship from which Nimue was born, and this storyline really goes in depth as to how that happens. Now, before Merlin goes into details on his relationship with Lenore, he tries from the get go to convince Nimue that the sword is dangerous and that Nimue should surrender it to him for him to take care of it. Not even thinking about the sword all that much at first, Nimue just really has 100 questions for Merlin. She really wants to know where the fuck were you my whole life? How did you meet my mom? Why did nobody ever tell me about this? Why did this other guy pretend to be my dad this whole time? Well, maybe he didn't even know himself, but that's besides the point. Nimue just wants answers to her questions. It makes knowing these prerequisite for surrendering the sword, or for even considering surrendering the sword. So Merlin finds himself without an option and is basically forced to share his past with Nimue. While they're in the castle, Nimue hears like ghostly spirit voices in the background, and Merlin tells her that these are the spirits of Festa and Murray, which were lovers from different clans that eventually, died in each other's arms in the castle, and their spirits kind of linger there. And the whole story sounds a lot like Romeo and Juliet, but somehow these spirits haunt this castle, for lack of a better word, and using them as a conduit, Merlin is able to transcend time and have Nimue see visions or perceive what happened in the past. So Merlin is in possession of this bead necklace, which he brought with him from Uther's castle. And this necklace used to belong to Festa and Murray. He says it's a relic of their love, so it must have been a gift that one of them gave to each other. And using these beads, kind of like prayer beads, where you just move them, as you pray through them, like maybe like the Catholic rosary, or the beads that Muslims use when they pray as well. He kind of does the same type of thing with it, but he clicks the beads. So there's a length of string in this necklace that doesn't have any beads, and it allows you to slide the beads hard and make them click. So every time he says a chant, he clicks them and clicks them and clicks them. And this clicking of the beads puts Nimue in a sort of trance that transports her and Merlin to the past. So this starts a series of visions that Nimue is going to have in this castle, where Merlin is basically going to be explaining to her, or actually just showing her, the answers to the questions that she has about his past with Lenore. So the first vision that Nimue has is a vision of Lenore rescuing a dying Merlin who just stumbled into the House of the Hidden, that underground cave with the table in the middle that Lenore was murdered in by the Red Paladins. Merlin just stumbles in there, and he's holding his chest, and there's something underneath the skin of his chest that's poisoning him. You can see his veins turning black around the object. Lenore wants to save his life, so she sedates Merlin, and when he's kind of like passed out, she takes a knife and she starts cutting into his chest to get that object out of him. And when she starts cutting, she hears a clinking of metal, and lo and behold, the object under Merlin's skin is the Sword of Power. So as you may recall from episode I want to say it's episode 1. I do believe it's at the end of episode 1. Merlin gets struck by lightning, and on the balcony of his tower in Pendragon's castle, and the giant sword scar marks his whole right side of his body, from his chest all the way to his leg. Now that wasn't explained at that point, but it seems clear that somehow, at one point or another, the sword was inside of Merlin's body. Lenore makes a big enough cut to get the sword out of Merlin, and she just pulls it out. She sticks her hand in his chest and pulls out the sword of power from inside of Merlin. When she pulls out the sword, it's like lit in flames. And she looks at it like, what the hell? And it's wrapped in like veins and all kinds of nasty stuff. Again, we don't know how the hell the sword got inside of Merlin. I have a theory about this, though. I think that Merlin himself somehow, he figured that the sword in anybody's hand would be too big of a danger or too much power for one person. He also, we're going to find out in a little bit, has experienced firsthand the corrupting forces that reside in the sword. So it's the cliche that power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The same thing happens with the sword of power. It's the best sword, the most powerful sword in this world that these people inhabit. But having that power really fucks people up. We're going to see later on how that sword starts turning Nimue into a little terrorist at times, and it absolutely corrupted Merlin at one point. So my theory is that in order to stop himself from wielding the sword, he somehow found an incantation or a way to seal the sword inside of his body so that nobody, including himself, could wield it. But it seems that the sword has so much dark energy that it even Merlin, being the powerful wizard that he is, and living the centuries that he's lived, it still managed to begin killing him, and that's when Lenore came in to save him. They don't say how long at that point Merlin had the sword inside of his body for. It'll be interesting to know maybe in season 2 if they go into if Merlin by any chance had the sword inside of his body for centuries at that point, or if it was like a year or something. So after Lenore takes the sword out of Merlin, she starts caring for him. She becomes his caretaker and healing him, and Merlin indeed starts getting better, and they start falling in love. So that's how the romance between Merlin and Lenore started. And at that point, Nimue's first vision ends, and Nimue needs a little break. So she asks Merlin if he has any food, and he doesn't, of course. And so he takes her outside, and he shows her a dead tree, and he tells her to revive the tree using her magic. Nimue doesn't know how to do that. And Merlin gives her a little sorcery lesson. Basically, he tells her to imagine an intention. So to not just go and try to make the tree come alive, but to imagine the tree alive, to imagine what it will look like to have that happen, and then to surrender that thought to the hidden as a way to control her magic. Because until this point in the story, Nimue has only been able to control her magic, or not even control it, just to employ it by accident out of fear or out of anger, out of all these negative emotions that she can't control. So this is a little trick that Merlin gives her for her to try to gain control of her abilities, and it works. So she just thinks about the tree bearing fruit and coming to life, and she surrenders that intention to the hidden, and it works. And the tree comes to life. It was a rotten tree, and then apples just start sprouting out of it all over the place, and next thing you know, Merlin is making her some applesauce. Now, after that, they go back into the room for another session of visions, and the first thing we see on vision number 2 is Merlin and Lenore fuck. So Nimue's like, oh, I don't want to see this. But he's taking her back. He can't control the past or what happened. So if she wants to know, she's gonna have to see. So basically, she saw her mom get hot and heavy with Merlin, and lo and behold, Nimue was brought into the universe. After Merlin and Lenore fuck, Lenore tells Merlin that she's promised to Jonah. Jonah is the guy that we thought was Nimwe's dad all along, but it turns out that I guess Lenore's family sold her to Jonah's family. It looks like it was some sort of arranged marriage, as she didn't love Jonah, but she had no choice but to marry him. After Merlin gets better, and we're brought into a scene where Jonah comes into the altar with his father, I believe, and Lenore, she's the caretaker of the altar at this point in time. At the time of her death, she was like one of the main sorcerers of the town. But at that point, she was just a caretaker of the altar. And Jonah comes in, and he's like, it's really obvious that they're not into each other. But this older man is kind of pushing the relationship. And from the shadows, we see Merlin, who sees Jonah and sees this older man, and they're kind of mistreating Lenore, bossing her around. And Merlin is like, screw this shit. So I'm not sure if he was trying to kill Jonah, but he starts waving his hands around and kind of like throw an energy ball or something at Jonah or do some sort of magic trick, and nothing's happening. So he's just waving his hands like an idiot, and nothing is coming out. So at this point, we find out that Merlin's magic is not working. At that point, he realizes it's because the sword was removed from inside of him. So he's like, oh shit. In his head, he's like, I lost my magic. I'm fucked. I gotta go find a sword. So he, after Jonah and everybody leaves, he runs into the temple screaming and just knocking everything down like a maniac, looking for Lenore, and asking her to give him the sword. Lenore lies to him, and she tells him that she destroyed the sword and threw it at the bottom of a lake or some shit, and or she threw the pieces in a river. But in reality, we later see that she hid the sword under the altar of the House of the Hidden. I don't think that Lenore was seduced by the power of the sword. At first glance, I thought this might be the case, but as I kept thinking about it, it became clearer to me that she knew that if she gave him the sword and he somehow got it in his body again just to regain his magic, it was gonna kill him. So I think she did this as an act of love, and that she was saving Merlin from himself, because he would have left his own, selfishness take over, and he would have ended up killing himself just to get his magic back. So after this happens, Lenore tells Merlin to leave forever. And I don't know if it was the fact that he just treated her so bad, or that she saw how bad he wanted the sword. She basically told him to go fuck himself and never come back. She said, let this be the last time I see your face. And that shit really stung Merlin. He felt super bad and he left. So I'm not sure if Lenore said that because she was just so disappointed in him that he will react that way just for his magic, or if she did it as an act of love and surrendered the life she could have had with him in exchange for making sure he lived because he didn't have the sword to kill him. I don't know, but I think it's a combination of both. Now, this ends Nimwe's second vision, and when she wakes up, Merlin is drunk and asleep. So and it's nighttime already. So it looks like Nimwe's been in that trip forever, and Merlin got bored and got drunk and passed out. So at that point, something really interesting happens, and this is gonna bring this session between Merlin and Nimue and the castle to an end. Nimue takes the beads from Merlin. So he's asleep. She takes the bead from his hands, and she goes over back to the bench where she was having the visions, and she talks into them. So she's using the same trick that Merlin told her. She's creating an intention and surrendering it to the hidden. She says, show me what he doesn't want me to see. And then she starts clicking and clicking the beats herself. And she gets what she asked for. So she's transported into this scene where we see Merlin looking like the God of War, like that video game, The God of War, just dressed like a barbarian with no shirt and like animal skins. He's super ripped. He has like these weird gray veins all over his face, and he just looks like a psycho. And when we see his arm, we see that his arm is like a monster arm. It's turned into like a dragon, like some sort of dragon rock monster hand that is fused with the sword. So the sword is also transforming this way. There's really evil looking vibe going on with the sword. So it's all scaly and spiky, and basically his right arm has fused with the sword at this point, and this sword is just controlling his life and just turning him into a monster. And now he's not alone. There's an army of Fae kind that also seem to be in this trance, but it looks like he's leading them. And we're in a Roman city or something like that in this scene, and the Fae are just slaughtering everybody in town. So all of these Romans with their robes and looking all, all educated and civilized, for lack of a better word, are just being slaughtered by these zombie-looking Fae that could pass by like animals. Now, leading the charge is Merlin, and the most horrible thing of the scene, on top of everybody just being slaughtered left and right by a bunch of zombie Fae, is that there's a father, a husband, and a wife and a baby on their knees crying in fear before Merlin, who looks like he's possessed by the devil. And they don't show it, but from Merlin's back, we see that he swings at them. So he slaughters this family of crying people with their baby in their hands, in this crazy rage that he's going through. When Nimue sees this, she loses her shit. Now, by that time is already daytime. By the time that vision is over, and she's really, she's justifiably freaked the fuck out. Merlin, he's kind of hiding this, and she tells him that he's a monster and that she would never give him the sword. And then Merlin tells Nimue that the sword makes you think that what you're doing is the right thing. So the sword has a way of messing with whoever wields it, with their mind, and making them think that when they kill somebody, that's the right choice. At that point, Merlin comes clean with Nimue and tells her his real intentions for the sword, which is to destroy the sword with the Fae fire. He makes it clear to her that he has no intentions of giving it to Uther. He said, "You've seen basically the horrors that this sword can cause, and I'm done with this shit. I don't want the sword in my life. I never want to touch it again. I'm going to destroy that shit in this Fae fire." Now, at that point, it seems like Nimue may have gone for that. It looks like Nimue may have been like, "Yeah, fuck it, let's destroy the sword. This thing is evil." But at that exact time, a few of Uther's Pendragon's soldiers arrive. They weren't sent by him; they were sent by his mother, and they try to, ambush Nimue, and they just start fucking galloping into the castle, and they scare off Nimue. But Nimue leaves thinking that Merlin has tricked her, that he had set this whole thing up to have the soldiers take the sword from her. And Uther's Pendragon's men, they detain Merlin when they arrive at the ruins. And he's pissed the hell off because they just scared Nimue off, and he was almost ready to get the sword. So at this point, Uther's Pendragon soldiers are on the chase after Nimue, Kaze, and Morgana. All three of them managed to escape. The whole time Nimue was in the castle, Kaze and Morgana were outside the castle grounds waiting for her. Nimue wanted to go in alone. And they arrive at this trench or at this, passage through the mountains called Brother's Blood. And Kaze, or I believe it's Morgana, tell Nimue that was a Roman battleground. We see, dead Roman soldiers or skeletons all over the place, littering that battleground. And they tell her that, according to legend, that battleground was cursed by the Cailleach, which is a demon spirit. And the story goes that the Cailleach caused 20,000 Roman soldiers to start killing each other. The Roman soldiers were after Celtic people, and the Celtic people that were being persecuted reached out to the Cailleach, begging for help to survive this attack from the Romans. And the Cailleach agreed and took care of them. She caused the Romans to start killing each other, but there was a big price to be paid for that, which was that the Celts had to pay her by giving her their children as sacrifice for the Cailleach to eat them, which is fucking horrible. And I don't know, how bad they wanted to escape, but that's so fucked up. I can never see myself doing some shit like that. I mean, it looks like these Celtic folk, they were guaranteed to be exterminated or something, and I don't know. That's just fucked up. Anyway, the Morgana tells Nimue that that these Celtic people, they dug caves and tunnels to evade the Romans, and that in order to escape from Uther's Pendragon's men, they should take those tunnels as shortcuts, to get the hell out of there. Now, it's revealed that the Cailleach, it's a spider god, and as they're going into these caves, we see a bunch, or on several occasions, we see these like Black Widow-looking spiders descending here and there, kind of like alluring to the fact that the Cailleach is watching everything. And at one point, they arrive at this cave, and I don't know, it looks like they're lost or something, and Nimue gets into a fight with Kaze because she's like, what's the point of this whole shit? I'm so tired of running. I didn't ask for this. I don't know how to protect anybody. I can't lead anybody if I don't even know where I'm going. And she loses her shit, and she throws the sword to the bottom of the cave. And Kaze and Morgana like, what the fuck? Why did you do that? So Morgana goes to the bottom of the cave to retrieve the sword. But the Cailleach was, she was influencing them to behave this way, and it was all in her plan. So at the bottom of the cave, when Morgana reaches to go get the sword, she sees a shadow of somebody, and when she looks up, it's Celia, Celia, which was Morgana's girlfriend from the convent, from the abbey, where they both used to live at. And Morgana thought that Celia was dead in the fire that the little crazy Irish girl started when she wanted to join the Red Paladins. And Celia is dead, but the Cailleach is allowing Morgana to see the dead. So it's like a reanimated body. It's more like a ghost, but she's really there. I mean, Morgana can feel her, can touch her. So somehow Morgana is able to cross the veil into the world of the dead and communicate with her dead lover, Celia. Celia tells Morgana that she will become the greatest sorcerer in Britannia, and she will decide who will hold the Sword of Power. Morgana is like so taken aback by this. I mean, imagine being able to have a conversation with the person you love the most, who you thought was dead. And this is what Morgana is going through. So her defenses are really down, and she's just in disbelief that her love Celia is there. So in the midst of all this, Celia, of course, being an agent of the Cailleach at this point, she puts her hands up to Morgana's lips, and we see a little spider go into Morgana's mouth, and Morgana swallows it. Now, Nimue is, she's at a temple inside of these caves, uh, waiting for waiting for Morgana and Kaze to come back so they can all leave together. And while she's waiting there, the torches go out, so she decides to turn them back on. And as she lights the torches back on, she has a vision of Arthur in danger, being burnt for fire as well. And at that point, her vision is over, and Nimue, Kaze, and Morgana return to Nemo's. Now, when Nimue is back at Nemo's, she gives an inspiring speech as she declares herself the first queen of the Fae queen. At that point, everybody's losing their shit and everybody's super happy. I mean, she was able to survive everything. She got inspiration from just see how bad things are out there, the persecution against her from everybody, from the paladins, from Uther's men, Merlin's betrayal, that having lost the sword in the cave and getting it back. She somehow has rallied her passion to, instead of just living for Lenore's dying wish, to live for her people, to live for the Faekind and fight on their behalf. Now, everybody, this is the end of episode 6, and everybody's super happy, and everybody's screaming, the Fae Queen, the Fae Queen. And in the back, we see Morgana, who sounds like a robot. So she sounds like her spirit's just dead. And we see her just saying, the Fae Queen, the Fae Queen. And it's obvious that at this point, the Cailleach it's really the one that's there. Morgana is just serving as the vessel for her. That's it for Nimue's escape from Uther's men after trying to meet with Merlin. An interesting character that comes into play in the second half of the show is called the Fisherman. And this dude is basically a mercenary. So the ugly lady from the bar that Merlin likes to get drunk at, that has like a jewel in her eye, she's one of the zombie, one of the zombie pawns of, what's this dude's name? King Rugen. She delivers a message to the Fisherman, and she says that Rugen is requesting his services to kill Merlin, and that if he does so, he's going to give him 10 trunks full of jewels. And the Fisherman agrees. So at this point, the Fisherman starts hunting Merlin throughout, the second half of the show. So at one point, we see that Merlin arrives at the midwife's estate to claim his favor in exposing Uther as illegitimate king. After his attempt to obtain the sword for Nimue fails, Merlin sees it that it's that his only other option is to use the midwife that he mentioned in the first half of the show as leverage to somehow find protection for his daughter Nimue, or to obtain the sword in that way. So turning against Uther because Uther's men just fucked up his plan. Now, after Merlin visits the midwife and the midwife goes with him, we see that a little while later, the Fisherman, again, he's on Merlin's trail. We see him killing everybody that was part of the midwife's family. He just fucking slaughtered everybody, the kids, everybody. Finally, the Fisherman does get a hold of Merlin as Merlin is, going through the forest on his horse, and he distracts Merlin with a white dove in a tree, and he hits him with a poison arrow in the chest. So at this point, it seems like Merlin is dying from this attack, and as the Fisherman comes over to Merlin to take him away and finish killing him, it looks like Merlin was mostly just playing dead. and takes the arrow from his chest, pulls it out, and stabs the fisherman, and killing him with the same poison arrow that the fisherman tried killing him with. But Merlin is still pretty fucked up. He's walking around with a hole in his chest. But nevertheless, he does walk out or walk away from this encounter with this mercenary that Rugen has sent out on his behalf. Another interesting character that that's going to play an important role, I believe, and more so in season 2 than anything, is the Red Spear. So the Red Spear looks like she used to be a member of King Cumber, the Ice King's court, and somehow she's exiled, but she's looking to get revenge from them. So it looks like she was somehow exiled unfairly, maybe by some trickery from King Cumber's daughters or something. Those girls seem like bad girls, and the Red Spear really hates them. Anyway, she starts getting more screen time during the second part of the show, and as we already know, Pym was on her boat, and they had been raiding different villages and things, but so far the villages have been going, the raids that they've been doing on the villages have been going pretty bad, and the Red Spear was pretty upset about this. So when she goes down to Pym's room to get healed, Pym advises her that the reason that these raids are going so bad is because they're robbing from people who've already been robbed by the Red Paladins. So Pym, in her wits, she advises the Red Spear that she should target the Red Paladins if she really wants some gold. So, the Red Spear's like, oh shit, this is a good fucking idea. I never thought about this. So the Red Spear says it's open season on the Red Paladins. After they give it a shot and they come back with their, coffers full of gold. So in one of these raids, Pym is asked to go with the raiders, and the guy that she likes and that likes her, his name is Doff, and he gives her his safety amulet of the Viking god Sigurd. He says that Sigurd is going to keep him safe, and that's the god that's kept him safe so far. So Pym puts on that necklace, and they go on this raid. And Pym has no business being there, she could barely hold an axe. But anyway, as they're on their way to ambush a Red Paladin camp, they are the ones that get ambushed by the Red Paladins, and they all get taken prisoner and put in the dungeons at Grimaire in the meantime. Now, one of the main issues that's going on the second half of the show is that Nemo's is becoming less and less of a paradise sanctuary, and the Red Paladins are really putting the pressure on these surviving Fae. So the main way that they're doing this is by starving them. So these Red Paladin fucks, they're really smart. This guy Cardin, the leader of the Paladins, he's the most evil, most soft-spoken, smartest motherfucker on the show. He's a zealot. He's really passionate. But this dude, he's just so sick. But anyway, they devised the idea of starving the Fae out by burning down their fields. So they're going from Fae village to Fae village, burning down all of the wheat, burning down the mills, basically cutting every food supply that they can, because they figured, hey, if we can't find Nemo's to kill the last of the Fae, we're gonna fuck with their food supply and let them die slowly by starvation. And that shit's working. So there's just one remaining mill left in operation that belongs to the Fae, and the people at Nemo's are starving. So at one point we see Arthur in a food line, and they close down the kitchen and say, hey, that's it, the food's over, and there's several people left without food. Now we see this young guy named Magwan who's basically being robbed of his food by one of the other people that were in line, by a gang of thugs that were that wanted to just take his food. So Arthur helps Magwan, and he fucking shoves his sword in this guy's stomach, the handle of it, not the sharp, not the blade, and knocks the wind out of this dude, and tells the dude to go fuck himself and to leave Magwan alone. And at that point, Magwan wants to be like Arthur's, right hand man, and wants Arthur to teach him how to fight because he's a wimp. But anyway, it's the conditions in Nemo's are basically going from this dreamy camp situation where people are getting married and there's music and people are giving each other clothes into more like a fucking jail, and people are just getting into fights among each other, even the survivors. So the council and Nemo's, the elders of the different clans get together, and they decide that they need to go get this get the flour from the last standing mill. So they send a group of guys out over there to go to obtain that. So leading the charge is Gawain, Arthur, and 4 others. Now, Squirrel, it's at Nemo's, like we saw him arrive with the Green Knight in the first part of the show. And he wants to accompany the Green Knight Gawain into battle, but he's not allowed to. Gawain tells him to go to the little kid's room. Now, when he goes back to the little kid's room, Iris, the little crazy girl from the Abbey, tells Squirrel to teach her how to use the bow. And this is going to be important later. And she tells Squirrel, hey, if anybody was responsible for killing my family, I'll make sure they died. So she's really, trying to encourage Squirrel to go against Gawain's advice into battle. On their way to the mill, Gawain, Arthur, and the other 4 men stop in the forest to, drink some water and rest their horses a little bit before they arrive at the mill. And this is kind of a sad part of the show because Gawain, he tells a story of how Cardan tortured and killed his friend, and he couldn't do anything about it. He's basically telling the guys, if I would have gone to try to help my friend, it would have been 2 dead Fays instead of 1. So he had to stay in the trees where he was hiding and watch his brother from the Fey Guard be tortured to death. Now it looks like Gawain's, modus operandum was with the Fey Guard was that they will hide in the trees. So they would blend in with the trees, wait until nighttime, and just fucking fall on the paladins like ninjas and slit their throats at night and just go back into to the trees at night and hide. And in this way, the paladins had a really hard time, fighting against the Fey Guard, and this is how Gawain made such a reputation for himself and became the hero of the resistance so far as the Green Knight. Gawain and the other 4 guys, or 3 of the other guys, they go into the mill and they tell Arthur and Magwan to go fetch some water for them while they retrieve the flour from the mill. At this point, they are ambushed, so Arthur and Magwan are ambushed by the Weeping Monk. And this fucking Weeping Monk, he kills Magwan. He, from several, I want to say maybe 50 feet away, they didn't see him, but he launches an arrow on Magwan and catches him right in the throat. And it kills him on the spot. And he throws another arrow to try to kill Arthur, but Arthur kind of like matrix his way out of the way, and the Weeping Monk misses him by an inch. At that point, Arthur and the Weeping Monk have a sword fight, and Arthur is cut pretty bad in the chest by the Weeping Monk's sword. But right before the Weeping Monk was going to kill Arthur, Gawain comes out of nowhere and saves Arthur. We later find out that Gawain and the other guys that were going to go get the flour from the mill were ambushed by the Red Paladins on their way there. So they are forced to take refuge in the mill with a group of the surviving Fae. But before heading into the mill, that's when Gawain goes and rescues Arthur's ass as well. So while they're all in there in the mill, they're surrounded by the Red Paladins who are riding their horses around them, taunting them and trying to knock down the doors on the mill. We see the squirrel appears at the mill, trying, to try to help the Green Knight. And of course, the Green Knight is annoyed that squirrel didn't listen to him because now he has another person he has to look over. Now, while they were trying to get into the mill, one of the Tusk men was shot by an arrow in his back. And they weren't sure if he was dead or alive, but he was laying on the floor nonetheless. The weeping monk, arrives from the forest into the mill, and he starts torturing this dude, and he realizes that he is alive. The guy's name was Bergerum. And he's doing this as a way to force the Green Knight to come out of the mill. Now, what I don't understand at this point is the weepy monk is standing in front of the mill, torturing Bergerum, looking away from the mill, and inside of the mill, there's at least 2 people with arrows, with bows and arrows. So this scene was kind of stupid because, yeah, he's trying to force the Green Knight to come out, but in all honesty, I mean, I know the weepy monk is a badass and he's a fucking Matrix ninja and all this shit, but they could have launched like 5 or 10 arrows in a row at this dude, and he wasn't looking. He wasn't looking, and he wasn't going to be able to block all arrows coming at him. I don't know. I just found this scene a little bit, I don't know, a little bit too make-believey for me. I didn't enjoy that fact because I'm like, come on, this dude was looking away for like 10 seconds several times. They could have put a few arrows in him and end that shit and save Bergerum. But instead, the Green Knight gives in to this to the request of the weeping monk and opens the door to come out. But as he steps out from behind him, Arthur shoots Bergerum in the chest, killing him. So he puts an end to his misery, forcing the Green Knight to snap out of it and come back inside. Because the same way he said the story earlier, he said, what's the point of having 2 dead Faes? Arthur reminds him of that. He says, we need you, dude. You can't just be going out trying to be a hero, trying to save this dude that's almost dead anyway. Get your shit together. So after the weeping monk didn't expect this, by the way. His face was super surprised. He's like, holy shit, what the fuck? What am I going to do now? So what they do then is they light the fucking mill on fire. So they start throwing arrows dipped in burning tar, lit on fire, into the mill, and eventually they start getting overwhelmed. And, the roof on the mill is starting to collapse on them. So they're like, hey, we can either die, burn to shit in here, or we can go out and we can try to take some of them with us if we're going to die anyway. So Gawain and Arthur come out the front entrance, swinging their swords, hacking Red Paladins left and right to give the other Fae survivors that are on the bottom of the mill a chance of escaping through the back door. Now, while Gawain and Arthur are really being an excellent team and fucking taking down paladins like crazy, something really, really cool happens. And at this point, I want to take a quick break just so I can give you guys a chance, if you want to pull up the scene. This is the timestamp for the scene is going to be minute number 39 on episode 7 of the show. I'm going to load it up real quick here on one of my screens, and we're going to watch it together because this is one of my favorite scenes of the show so far. And it's best described just by looking at it. So I'm going to do that real quick, and I'll be right back. All right, so we have the episode rolling, and let's see. We see Gawain and Arthur look at each other, and they both start running sword in hand towards the paladins. And these paladins are they're dropping like fucking flies. These dudes are amazing at doing that. So we see Squirrel is actually the one leading the charge for the Fae who are escaping from the burning mill. Now, the reason I selected this section as one of the ones that it's really worth taking a second look at is not so much because of Arthur and Gawain's badass sword skills, but because something pretty amazing is going to happen. So we see the Weeping Monk running towards Arthur and Gawain, about ready to go kill him. And the mill, there's like a hurricane that starts forming, or a tornado that starts forming around the mill. So the fire in the mill, it's consumed by this wind, and everybody stops fighting in the middle of this. And then this tornado bends down on itself and just falls all over, the paladins. At this point, nobody knows what's going on. Gawain doesn't know what's going on. Arthur doesn't know what's going on. But we see Kaze come running and take, both of the good guys away with her. And this tornado just completely consumes all of the paladins. Now, the shit about this tornado is that because nobody can see anything, everybody's just swinging their swords left and right, and the paladins are killing each other. And then we see Nimue at the edge of the forest with the Sword of Power stuck in the ground. Then at this point, it becomes obvious that she's the one that caused this tornado. Now, the Weeping Monk looks confused as hell, and he's fucking angry. But that's it for that scene. It's one of my favorite scenes of the second part of the show, from episodes 6 to 10. It's really worth of watch because it's not always that we get to see Nimue really utilizing the powers that she has in combination with that she gets from the sword. Now, after the events that took place at the mill, the Fae retreat back to Nemo's, escaping from that shit show that was the mill, the failed mission, because they couldn't even come back with any food for the Fae that were at the caves. But nevertheless, they left the trail of blood for the Weeping Monk to follow. And the Weeping Monk discovers the location of Nemo's, so he sends for Cardan and he sends for reinforcements. And one of the guards of Nemo's, one of the, it looks like, I want to say she's one of those antler people. I'm not sure what the name of that clan is yet. But she looks like a combination between a human and like a deer or something. Anyway, she's one of the guards of the forest outside of Nemo's, and she, brings the news to the people at Nemo's that the Weeping Monk and the Paladins have discovered their location and they're just days out. Arthur comes up with an idea, and he shows up with this smuggler named Druna, and his proposition is that they can sneak the remaining Fae people on 3 ships that leave in 6 days to the Byzantine Empire, to Byzantium, as a safe haven, because over there they're not persecuted. So at this point, they're left with a dilemma. So they're 1 day away from being destroyed and 6 days away from being rescued. So they have to make a decision, and Nimue decides that the closest location where they can possibly survive for 6 days is Grimmaire. So she gets it in her head that they can do it. So that's the next course of action. Nimue decides to take Grimmaire and to just hold off there for 6 days until the ship arrive, and at that point they can escape to Byzantium. And it's not ideal. Nobody wants to leave their lands, but at least they'll survive and live to fight another day. So they take this course of action. They evacuate Nemos, and by the time the Weeping Monk arrives with the paladins, Nemo is vacant. So Nemo's is like again, it's just a cave system, and they burn everything down when they realize nobody's there. And next thing we know, Nimue is standing outside of Grimere. Uh, she's riding a white horse. I'm not sure if this is the same white horse that she had on episode 1, but nevertheless, she's riding her white horse outside of the city of Grimere to taunt the Red Paladin guards that are keeping watch, outside of the city walls. So when she's spotted by one of the Paladin guards, everybody, loses their shit, and they start screaming, "Witch, witch, the Woodblood witch, the Woodblood witch." So they get a little army ready, and I want to say, shit, it must have been like at least 25 guys that went out, a little battalion, into the woods to go find Nimue because she rode the horse back into the woods. So this is another episode timestamp that I want to provide. In this case is minute 15 with 20 seconds of episode 8. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up that scene here so I can let you know exactly what's going on in this scene. But just to give you a quick hint, it's another one of Nimue's awesome, witchcraft badassery scenes that I really love, because there's nothing better than seeing a bunch of paladins get their ass whooped by Nimue. So let me get that up here and we'll get right to it. So we see the Red Paladins walking up to Nimue, and again she's on her knee with the Sword of Power stuck on the ground, and we see Nimue's her druid green leaves that come up from her cheeks and her neck start glowing bright green, and she's really concentrating and really sending that intention into the hidden. And she starts controlling the trees and these fucking branches. So again, there's a bunch of guys. There's like 20 guys at least on their horses, and the tree branches just start impaling these dudes like through their cheeks, wrapping them through the neck. It looks like a giant fucking tree kraken just came down and started sucking all these guys up to the tree canopy. And the main guy got stabbed right in the cheek, and it was pretty grimy. So after that, the guy that's calling the shots at the wall, he says, send another battalion. And the Wolfblood Witch just walks in through the Grimere's gate like she owns the place. And she's like, all right, motherfuckers, give up your weapons, or you're going to end up dead like the other dudes. And she's covered in their blood, too. So she's killed a bunch of them at this point. And the guy that was sending the guards out, his name is Valus. He challenges Nimue into a sword battle. And at first, Nimue is losing the fight. Nimue, she's really exhausted, using her ability to interact with the hidden, and also the sword really drains the shit out of Nimue. So at this point, she's really exhausted from that. Also, the day before, she summoned a fucking tornado, so she's drained. And when it comes time to fighting this dude Valus, she's pretty exhausted, and it looks like this guy's gonna kill her. But then at one point, Nimue says, "Give me your power." To the sword, and when she turns around and swings it, she cuts Valus in half, right down the waist. So we see his fucking top part go one way, his bottom part go another way, his spine sticking out. It's pretty nasty, but nevertheless, the other paladin dudes get the message when they see that shit, and at that point as well, the Fey Trojan horse takes over Grimere. So the Fey people have been snuck in wagons, and Arthur was hiding around with his hood on, and basically everybody was already there. Nimue was just there to deal with the paladins, to put fear in their hearts and allow them or cause them to surrender with this, this big theatrical takeover, or the feet of their fighters. So it worked because once they realized that Nimue was able to do all that, and once they realized that they were surrounded by the surviving Fays that had snuck into the city, the remaining paladins they run out. So they leave Grimaire, and Nimue indeed successfully took the city of Grimaire. Now, at that point, Nimue also finds out that Pym is alive. So this is episode 8 at this point. So from the very, I want to say it's episode 1 or 2. Almost from the beginning of the show, Nimue thinks that Pym is dead. I mean, she saw a red paladin take her away on his shoulder, and everybody in her town gets slaughtered. I think Nimue just thought that Squirrel was the only other surviving member of her town. So she's really happy to see that Pym is alive. And when Pym sees her, she asks Nimue to heal Duff, who's dying from the attack they suffered at the hands of the paladins. They were taken prisoners and put in the dungeons there. But Nimue is just too weak. I was really curious to see if Nimue would have been able to heal Duff. Pym says, "Hey, your mom was a healer. Maybe you can heal him too." I mean, she does have magical abilities, but until this point in the show, I haven't seen anything that indicates that Nimue has healer abilities. On the contrary, her abilities seem to kill people most of the time. So, nevertheless, Dolph dies, and Pym is pretty bummed out about that, but there was nothing to be done. He was already too far gone. After Nimue kicks the paladin out of Grimaire, she confronts Sir Ector. And this was a pretty badass scene because Ector is sitting in his throne room, and he, being as arrogant as always, asking her, "What the fuck you think you're doing, taking over my city? What's wrong with you?" And Nimue, at this point, it's hard to tell if Nimue is just owning the fact that she became the baddest bitch in the land, and she's just ready to, come into her own. And she's the fucking queen of the Fae, and people are gonna listen to her. So I don't know if that's it, or if it's her really just being corrupted by the sword of power. It's really not clear to me, at least, which one it is, because at least from the beginning of the show, although Nimue was no pushover, I didn't see that in her nature from before she started wielding the sword. She looked like a really good person, and not that she became a bad person, but it seems out of character. And the more I think about it, the more I think it's the sword really influencing her thought process, making her more power hungry, and more ruthless. But nevertheless, Nimue tells Ector, "You're in my seat, motherfucker," and he has to get the fuck up. He's super humiliated as always. Ector always getting humiliated by everybody, at least in his own eyes. But this was pretty badass for Nimue. She tells him to get the fuck out of the seat, and she sits down on her chair like a boss, as she says, "For the next 6 days, this is my town." So another thing that happens while the Fae occupy Grimaire is that there was a convoy of Fae. So some of the people from I think it's from Nemo's. Maybe they left on different convoys, but one of them is missing. So the Green Knight is sent out to go investigate, and he finds those missing Fae dead in a big ditch. So all of them have just been slaughtered. And to the Green Knight's surprise, he's encountered by the Weeping Monk. So he's surprised by the Weeping Monk in the forest, and they start battling. In the forest, they start having a sword fight, and in this sword fight, Gawain he gets shanked by the Weeping Monk. So he gets fucking stabbed, and it's pretty sad. But he's still alive, and the Weeping Monk takes him. Now, I really like this scene in the show, just from a visual. It's very, how can I put it? It's just nice to look at. It's like choreographed fighting, and they're both so good, and it's just a badass scene. If you guys want to watch it, that's gonna be on 45 minutes and 30 seconds of episode 8. Gawain sees the people in the ditch, and the Weeping Monk just fucking comes out of nowhere, flying like a ninja with his sword drawn, and they start having this epic battle. Now, the Weeping Monk is such a bad motherfucker, literally and figuratively. He's just fucking. He's like a gymnast. It's like he defies gravity when he's fighting, and he fights with 2 swords sometimes, with a hood, totally obscuring his peripheral vision, and somehow he's still fucking able to just swing that shit and block everybody's attack. Now, something that's really important about this scene, that's really gonna be a big influence down the road, is the fact that at this point, it is revealed that the Weeping Monk is a Fae. So this trading motherfucker, he stumbles in this fight with Gawain, and he lands on his hand. His hand lands on the floor, and like the little kid on on episode 1, that Cardan puts the little leaf to his hand, and the little boy's hands turn into a leaf. The same way, the Weeping Monk's hand turns into a leaf when he touches the floor. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I wonder if that little boy was the Weeping Monk. That just clicked for me. I had not thought about it, but I mean, it would have been a major coincidence if they both, if they would have shown the fact that they show Cardan putting the leaf on the boy's hand, and it turning, and turning him into and turning his hand into like a green leaf hand, and the fact that the Weeping Monk's hand is turning green as well in this scene. I'm gonna have to rewatch that later just to double check, but I have to see if that little boy looks like the Weeping Monk. But maybe that's what it was. Maybe that it's just the show showing us the origin of the Weeping Monk, which we're later gonna find out Cardan, adopted the Weeping Monk and whatnot. So that's how he became a traitor. It looks like he was taken as a child. So back at Grimaire, the plans for a triumphant escape, or a lucky escape out of Grimaire into Byzantium on the ships that the smuggler was going to provide through Arthur, that plan went to shit. So the smuggler's head was thrown over the walls, or was found outside of the walls, I believe. So the shit is, now they don't have a smuggler. So they took Grimaire, they thought about holding it for 6 days and taking those ships out of there, and now they have no ships. And Grimaire is running low on food again. So they're back to square one, and Nimue has to figure something out. On top of that, Nimue comes to the front of the gates, and she goes to the watchtower, and she sees that she is or Grimaire is being approached by 2 armies. So there's an army of Red Paladins, and there's an army of King Uther Pendragon's men. And these are real armies with like hundreds of dudes marching towards Grimaire. So they don't have a way out, and they have two armies marching towards them, and the people are going to start starving there as well. Now, something else that happens in Grimaire is that Merlin eventually makes his way there. So after the fisherman, stabs him with the arrow in his chest, Merlin somehow manages to reach Grimaire to try to talk to Nimue to save her life. It really looks like the Merlin at this point just doesn't give a fuck about the Fae, or just thinks that the whole endeavor is just pointless because they're just doomed to die anyway. His only concern is Nimue somehow, selflessly. And he asked her to surrender to Cumber the Ice King because Cumber has offered to protect her. Well, not offer. It's Merlin worked out that deal for her. But Nimue, of course, rejects that request by Merlin and offers him, a room for the night so that he can recover, because he looks like a sack of shit when he shows up to see Nimue. Now, one of the final things that becomes very important in Grimaire is this idea of Nimue becoming more and more corrupted by the sword, by the evil, it seems, that lives inside of the sword. As we see that a Tusk clan member, so the Tusk clan are men that, as the name implies, have these big tusks that stick out from the back of their necks, and they have some tusks or horns that come out of the forehead and their cheekbones. Anyway, they're pretty wild men, these guys. And one of these guys, he kills a human. He kills a man blood. This Tusk dude was douchebag. He saw that the guy, he had a red cross painted on the door of his home as a way to protect himself against being murdered by the paladins. And the Tusk dude didn't like that. So he just fucking jumped the dude with two of his friends and just killed him for no reason. So Nimue, is not having none of this shit. So she had made it clear that if they were to take Grimaire, that nobody can harm any humans. And it's not because Nimue just cares so much about humans. It's because she's concerned with maintaining the image of the Fae. Now, if the Fae go around harming humans are not going to want anything to do with the Fae. So they need to make sure to, to hold themselves to a higher standard so that they're flawless in front of humans. So Nimue is pretty pissed off when she finds out that this Tusk dude killed this other dude for no reason. And as she's confronting this guy, he just keeps laughing. He keeps smirking at the fact that Nimue is pissed off, and he's just being a little smart ass. And Nimue, she starts becoming the little psycho that the sword is making her, and pulls out the sword and flings that shit and cuts this dude's hands off. She cuts both of his hands right off. So remind you, this is the second time Nimue has cut somebody's hands off. The first time around was Arthur's boss. But so Nimue is getting really comfortable with cutting people's bodies and body parts off, and just killing people in general. And she tells the dude, laugh again and I'll have your head. So she's not playing, and this guy has to be dragged out of the room, and everybody is fucking scared as shit. You should have seen Arthur's face in this scene. He was he looked like he needed to go to the bathroom to change his little his underwear liner or something. he shat his pants. All right, so that's it for Grimaire. The next big part of these series of episodes is King Cumber's claim to the throne. So as I said earlier, Merlin brings the midwife to King Cumber's camp as proof that Uther Pendragon is an illegitimate king. So King Cumber, he's been making the claims to the throne, ever since he found out that Uther was not a real member of the royal family, and therefore he should not be king. But he didn't have any proof. So having the midwife is a great help to Cumber because it legitimizes his claim. So there's a living person that is that has evidence and has a first person account of the fact that King Uther Pendragon should not be king. So in return for delivering the midwife, Merlin asks Cumber the Ice King that he guarantees safety for Nimue. So Cumber the Ice King has his people start spreading news that Uther is an illegitimate king and throughout the kingdom as a way to turn King Uther's subjects against him. So the plan that King Cumber has is turning Uther's people against him. So Merlin makes it clear to Cumber that between the forest he's hiding in and Pendragon Castle, there were too many people that were still subjects of King Uther and had no reason to welcome King Cumber's, claim to the throne. So Merlin advised that by changing the hearts of the people of the kingdom, King Uther's subjects, that once everybody finds out that King Uther is an illegitimate king, that they would just open the roads up for King Cumber all the way up to Pendragon Castle, allowing him to claim the throne of England for himself. So as the word is spreading throughout the kingdom that King Uther is not the real son of the wife of the king, of the deceased king, he confronts his mother and he's like, yo, everybody's saying this shit about me. What the hell? And his mom just snaps at that point. She's like, listen, you little shit. It's true. You're not my son. You're a lousy king. And my son, she says, which is fucked up. She says, my real son will be made of finer steel. So she basically just calls him a sack of shit after having raised him his whole life. Now, King Cumber, having all these new options on his table, he has dinner with Cardan and with Merlin. And Cardan is trying to convince King Cumber that he should join forces with the Red Paladin. But Merlin keeps belittling and downplaying King Cardan's power or influence, really because he knows that the Red Paladin army are looking for Nimue and trying to exterminate the Fae. He basically tells King Cumber, yeah, the church has a lot of power, but none of it is sitting at this table. Basically telling Cardan that he ain't shit. Now, Cardan doesn't like that. He's a proud man of God and all this crap. So basically, he asked Cumber, "Hey, are you for the Fae or are you for the church?" And Cumber has the most badass reply I've ever heard anybody say at a show, and he says, "I'm for myself." So he basically tells both of them to go fuck themselves. That he really acts like a king. He really has king answers to king problems. It looks like. I wonder if he will be a better king than Uther. Although as we're gonna talk about in a little bit, Uther little by little he's finding his cojones and he's getting his shit together and starting to rule as a proper king. The last thing about Cumber is that word reaches him that people are no longer really paying too much attention to the fact that Uther is not is an illegitimate king because they're more concerned with the fact that there's a new queen in town. So people are riling behind the Fae Queen. Uh, and Cumber rightly feels threatened by this because it's negatively affecting his plan. He crafted this plan to take the throne. Next thing he knows, there's a new queen in town, and he doesn't like that. So he changes his mind, and instead of offering Nimue sanctuary in his court, once he does become king, he's thinking of just locking her up into dungeons. Once he does, get a hold of her. This is what he tells Merlin, at least, that he's going to offer her dungeons. But in reality, King Cumber wants her dead. He doesn't want to have that threat around, and he actually forms an alliance with the Red Paladins. He sends his daughter to form this alliance, and the Paladins are offering him the Sword of Power in exchange for the Wolfblood Witch. So Cardin is really most concerned with killing Nimue, who has become the figurehead and the hope of the Fae people. So he feels like if he kills the Wolfblood Witch, he's cutting the head off the snake, and the extermination of the remaining Fae will just be a matter of time. In the second half of the show, we also learn a lot about the Weeping Monk and also about how the Paladins operate. As the Paladins are making camp and preparing to overthrow Grimere, because they've come to realize that that's where Nimue is hiding, the Pope from Rome has sent Abbot Wicklow to supervise the Red Paladin campaign against Nimue. And as this dude, Abbot Wicklow, shows up, at the same time the Weeping Monk shows up carrying Gawain as a prisoner on his horse. And Cardin asked that Gawain be taken to Brother Salt's kitchen to be tortured, to have answers or information tortured out of him. The Weeping Monk is confused in this whole exchange because Gawain says, "Oh, I know a lot of secrets," and he looks at the Weeping Monk and he looks at Cardin. I think Cardin knew right away what he meant. The fact that the main champion of the Paladins was a Fae. So there's this huge hypocrisy going on where they're going around killing all the Fae, but their main fighter is a fucking Fae. So, the Weeping Monk goes into some sort of like an existential crisis about this because Gawain, although Gawain has just been stabbed, he's been tortured, he's been belittled and all this by the Paladins and by the Weeping Monk. He doesn't understand how Gawain hasn't given him up yet, and how Gawain is actually being nice to him now that he knows that he's a Fae. He says, he tells the Weeping Monk, "You're our brother. Even the lost Fae are our brother." So he tells him that he's lost, and I don't know. I think this really touches the Weeping Monk in a way. At least it shakes his faith a little bit. Now, something important that comes out of Gawain's time at the kitchen is that when the Weeping Monk confronts them and says, "Hey, why didn't you give me out?" Gawain identifies him as an Ash Man. He says, "You're one of the Ash folk." So it looks like the Ash folk are a clan or a type of clan of Fae, and he says that the Ash folk are not that haven't been seen in those lands for centuries. So he's a rare type of Fae, but a Fae nonetheless. Now, our little hero wannabe squirrel, he shows up at the camp. It looks like he followed Gawain into the Paladin camp. Anyway, Squirrel's there to try to save the Green Knight, but sadly, it looks like Brother Salt basically has broken Gawain's knees or something, and he tells Squirrel that he can't walk. So Squirrel's super sad and he's sobbing and stuff. But Gawain tells him to get on his knee, so he's basically knighting him as one of the Fae Guard. but just as he tells Squirrel, okay, just get out of here before they find you. Uh, Brother Salt comes and takes Squirrel. So Squirrel is brought before Carden, and the Weeping Monk is there as well. And Carden says, "Hey, we're gonna have Brother Salt deal with Squirrel." And something inside of the Weeping Monk kind of clicks, and he intervenes on behalf of Squirrel, and he says, "Hey, this is just a kid. Why are you gonna take him to Squirrel?" Um, Carden tells the guards, the paladins, to take Squirrel anyway to Brother Salt, and then he just slaps the shit out of the Weeping Monk right in the face, and then he walks up to him and he says, "Why will you embarrass me?" It's really sick. It's really, like, really abusive behavior. I don't know. Carter just has that creepy ass motherfucking vibe. Anyway, and the Weeping Monk is a grown ass man, and he just takes that. So that it really starts showing the type of relationship that Carden has with the Weeping Monk. So after all this happens, we see the Weeping Monk kneeling in his tent praying, and for the first time we can see the Weeping Monk back is covered in lacerations and scars. It looks like whip scars. It looks like Carden must have beat Jesus into this guy as a kid, and brainwashed the shit out of him, and to the point where, so he's this mess of a man that he is. This tool. He made him into a warrior, a brainless warrior that he can just control as he wishes. Now, the Weeping Monk is questioning his faith, and he tells Carden, "I can't feel his grace," talking about God's grace. And he says, "Father, do you love me?" And Carden says, "Of course I loved you." And he says, how can God love me if I'm condemned or something like that? And Carden says that he kept him because he could sense other fae. So the Weeping Monk has an ability to sniff out other fae kind. I don't know. I guess it's some sort of like pheromone or something. I really don't understand what that power is all about. But the Weeping Monk has a way of finding other faes. And this is the only reason Carden kept him, because he will be like a bloodhound and help him in his mission to exterminate the Fae. And Carden also tells him that he basically laid the foundation for him to be saved, although he was born from the devil. So there's some real fucked up religious brainwashing type thing going on between Carden and the Weeping Monk. And the Weeping Monk, he's the greatest warrior in the land and a very powerful fae, but nevertheless he's like a child at mind that is controlled by this sick man, Carden. Now something must have clicked with the Weeping Monk, because as Squirrel was in Brother Salt's kitchen in his tent, about ready to be tortured by Brother Salt, who, by the way, has his eyelids sewn shut because somehow his eyes were ripped out or something. As he was gonna get started torturing Squirrel, the Weeping Monk walks into that tent and slits Brother Salt's throat, and he saves Squirrel. Now, as the Weeping Monk is basically running away with Squirrel, he's intercepted by the Trinity Guard and Brother or Abbot Wicklow. It looks like Abbot Wicklow is not going to allow him to escape with Squirrel. I don't know if I think Abbot Wicklow picked up on the fact that the Weeping Monk is a fae as well, and he wants to kill him. So needless to say, the Trinity Guards are pretty badass. They have those gold masks, and we can never see their faces and anything. They almost look like otherworldly warriors. Um, but the Weeping Monk, of course, serves their ass to them in a silver plate and kills a bunch of them on the first wave of attacks. Now, on the second wave of attack, they have like these weird weapons where they can tie his arms up, and it's kind of like spiked balls on a chains and a bunch of shit that he can't get away with from. But right before the Trinity Guard was going to kill the Weeping Monk, our little hero Squirrel jumps out from behind some crates where he was hiding, and he says, which one of you is gonna go first? With those little brave rants he be having. And the Trinity Guard is distracted for a second, just long enough for the Weeping Monk to grab his sword and kill the rest of the remaining Trinity Guard. On their way out of camp, the Weeping Monk and Squirrel ride on a horse. They're helping each other out, and we see that Squirrel tells the Weeping Monk that his real name is Percival, and the Weeping Monk also reveals his real name for the first time in the show. His name is Lancelot. Something that I want to mention about the Trinity Guard as well is that Iris, our little crazy girl Iris, eventually becomes a Trinity Guard. We're gonna see why later, but this is important because she ends up being like a hero and going to Rome and earning the honor of becoming one of the Trinity Guards of the Pope. Now, another topic I wanted to talk about briefly was Uther Pendragon's coming of age, so to speak. So basically, him taking control of his life and of his destiny. So this really starts when he poisons his mom. So as fucked up as it seems, he realizes how much of a controlling freak and an abusive person his adoptive mother is, and he's the king. He realizes that his rule is threatened by the fact that his mother has all this newfound power, and that she basically just wants to use him as a figurehead for her rule. So he's not having that, and he gives her poisoned wine, and she ends up dying. Now, after he does this, he takes control of the current situation that is happening with Nimue and everything. So he sends Borley, his advisor, to Grimaire to negotiate with Nimue, negotiate for her surrender. So Nimue doesn't like the offer that Borley brings to her. It was a shit offer, basically. But the offer was basically just give up. Nimue makes a counter offer, and she requires that King Uther Pendragon provides a guarantee of protection to the Fae and to be a king to all, to humans and Fae alike. Now, something else in relationship to Uther's Pendragon's basically coming of age or taking control of his kingdom is that he basically is no longer honoring that alliance that his mother made with Cardan. So Cardan is pretty pissed off at the fact that Uther sent an advisor to Grimaire to make a deal with Nimue without having the church involved. So Cardan, Abbot Wicklow, and the Weeping Monk go to Uther's camp, demanding an explanation for this, as to why they were not invited to negotiate with Nimue. And Uther basically tells them to go fuck themselves and that he has 5,000 soldiers ready if they got anything to say. Now, after Uther offers Nimue that offer of basically providing rescue ships for the Fae so that they can escape north in exchange for her surrender, Merlin goes to Uther to try to feel him out and see if he's really saying the truth or if there's any trickery involved with his offer to Nimue. And it looks like Uther was saying the truth. So Merlin is pleased with that, and he realizes that Uther has done all this without his mother's influence. And then Uther tells him that he's killed his mother. Merlin tells Uther that he's proud of him, and Uther, in his self-absorbed way, says, "Oh, we've longed to hear these words from you, Merlin." And Merlin fucking puts his foot in his mouth by saying, "Hey, don't worry about the midwife. You know, she might be your mother, but whatever." And Uther's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! You knew about that shit?" And gesture to his guards and has Merlin shanked, and he is left for dead in a tent. Now, as Nimue had agreed with Uther, she's going to surrender herself in exchange for ships so that the Fae can escape north. Um, Obviously, Arthur is not happy with this. You know, at this point, and Nimue are in love. You know, they're in a relationship, sort of. And Nimue's like, hey, you know, I got to do this for my people. I love you, but I still got to do this shit. And I guess as a goodbye gift, or as a hey, we're never gonna see each other again, so let's make this night count. And finally, on episode number 9, our beloved friend Arthur indeed gets his dick wet, and him and Nimue make love. So finally, since episode 1, they've been flirting a lot, just beating around the bush a little bit too much, and they finally consummate the love in episode number 9, and it's a beautiful scene, and it's really loving. And Arthur and Nimue, at least based on what we can see from the scene, it looks like they really love each other. And it's really fucking sad that he knows that she's gonna fucking get executed the next day. I hated that. I hate when things like that happen in shows where it's like there's just no way out. That's just, I don't know. I guess I'm like that in real life, where it's just, if I don't, I always want to feel like I have an option. So it's frustrating when Nimue is in this position where this is it. She fucked the love of her life, and she knows she's gonna die the next day. That's just a fucked up situation to be in. So, we see also the Fae the day after. They're getting ready. Everybody's happy. Hey, we're finally going to get out of this fucking Grimere City and go be free in some land somewhere. And Nimue and Arthur kiss goodbye because Arthur is going to be leading the Fae to safety. And Nimue is going to be going over to Pendragon's castle or camp as soon as she gets word that Uther kept his word. Now, as she's waiting around for this, we see our little neighborhood creep Iris sneaking around the castle, and she's looking for Nimue to try to kill her. While she's waiting, Nimue does get word that Uther kept his word, and the ships are arriving at the beach for the Fae to board and safely leave the land. And she goes to surrender. So Nimue is going on her way to Uther to surrender herself, but she has the smarts to not take the sword with her. So she gives the sword to Morgana for her to hide, and she tells Uther once she arrives at his camp that he can have the sword once the paladins give her back Gawain and Squirrel. So she's using the sword as a bargaining chip to get back her friends. Because these, Gawain and Squirrel are two of the people that she loves the most in her life, and they're really important to her. So Uther puts Nimue in a tent, and he says he's going to think about it. Eventually, they do bring Gawain out to Nimue, and he's beaten to an inch of his death. And at that point, Nimue really loses her shit, and she starts screaming, and because she realizes that Gawain is gonna die any second now. And in that rage, she causes like this sonic boom to go off, and all of the fires in the camp is nighttime, so there's many fires going on as a light source,
And the sonic boom that stems from the tent that Nimue is in just causes all of these fires to just explode. Now, Cardin wanted Nimue because he just wanted to be done with her. He wanted to kill her. And Uther Pendragon said that he wasn't going to uh, allow the church to kill Nimue right away because that would just make her into a martyr. So he was going to hold on to her for a little while and then execute her later. Cardin is really pissed off about this because he feels like he's waited so long already to get his hands on Nimue. So Cardin goes off to the Paladins camp and he riles up all the Paladins and says, "Hey, Uther's a bullshit ass king. He's not even a real king. Fuck him. We're not gonna wait for him to give Nimue over to us. Let's go get her ourselves." So the Uther's camp is invaded, and Paladins are killing Uther soldiers, and Cardin is just searching for Nimue, and eventually she is brought before him because she's weak from that explosion that she caused, and it looks like Cardin is going to kill Nimue, but right as he raises his sword to chop off her head, it looks like we see the widow appear in front of him. And he says, "What work of demon is this?" And it turns out that the widow is Morgana. Now, Morgana wasn't always the widow, but we're going to explain a little bit about that in just a second when we get to Morgana. But nevertheless, the widow appears out of thin air in front of Cardin as Morgana and hands her the sword. Remember, Nimue have given the sword to Morgana for safekeeping, so Morgana appears out of nowhere like a ghost and hands the sword out to Nimue. The sword is glowing and it's fully charged. Nimue doesn't have to ask for its power. The power is already there and ready to go. And Nimue swings that bad boy and finally cuts off this motherfucking Cardin's head and hands off in one swoop. Now, they also find Merlin, who's about to die, and all three of them escape that fucking shitfest. The Paladins and Uther's men are killing each other, and they're also on the hunt for Nimue. So all three of them escape. Now, before we continue with what happens at the end of that scene, let's jump real quick over to Morgana because I want to explain how she ended up being the widow. So remember how I said that Morgana got a little spider in her mouth from the Kaliak when Celia, touched her face in the cave. Well, while she was in the cave, Celia told her that she was going to see a dead man outside of a bell tower. So that did happen in Grimere, and inside of that bed of that bell tower, they had the dying, people, people that were injured, people that were dying. They were all kept inside of the bell tower, and they were being watched by by Jiva, the old Moonwing, and Morgana offered to help because she used to help in the abbey. Now, the reason that Morgana was told to go in there is because she is now able to see this, between worlds. So she can see the living and she can also see the dead. So while she's in there, she sees the original widow, so the one that is acquainted with Merlin, claiming the lives of the ones that are dying. So she basically hovers over them or bends down over them and lifts her veil and sucks their life force away. Now, the creepy thing about the widow is that she has this really ugly, like, skeleton or skull face. Um, and at this point, she doesn't realize that Morgana can see her. So she's like studying Morgana, and Morgana can totally see her. But Morgana plays it off and doesn't allow the widow to realize that she can see her. But she's totally freaked out because she's seeing people having their souls sucked out and dying right after. Now, a scene that is very sad and in relationship to the widow and to Morgana and everything is gonna be it's episode 8. And the timestamp for that is 42 minutes and 30 seconds. In that scene, the widow warns Merlin that Nimwe's name has been giving up. So what she means by this is that her name has come up to die as one of the people that she has to claim. Now, it's really heartbreaking, this scene, because we see Merlin begging. He says, no, not her, please, not her. And he's crying and sobbing. And the widow says, I can't change it. Her fate is sealed. This explains then why Morgana sees the widow at Nimwe's chamber at the at Grimaire. Now, at this point, the widow has caught on to the fact that Morgana can see her, and the widow basically says, "You don't know what type of black magic you're playing with, girl. You've been given the sight to see into dark worlds by the Cahuliac. These are dark shadow lords you're dealing with." And Morgana, as she says, "Don't try to interfere." And Morgana says, "But you can't do this." And before she gets her words out, the widow, fucking Darth Vader, chokes her ass against the wall. And it's a really powerful display. Like, Morgana just flies against the wall, and you see all this wind and all this power being thrusted at her, and it's pretty impressive. So it looks like the widow's indeed a really powerful individual herself. So once Morgana was hiding in the forest with the Sword of Power, as Nimue told her to, Celia told her, that she finally got the sword and that she should take it to the Cahuliac's cave, and she basically she's just doing the Cahuliac's work for her and trying to convince Morgana to surrender the sword. And Morgana basically snaps out of it, it looks like, finally. And she says, no, I gotta warn Nimue. So that's how Morgana ends up at the King Uther's camp, while she's sneaking around the camp to try to find Nimue to warn her about the fact that she's going to die. She sees the widow. The widow says, "I told you not to interfere," but somehow Morgana kills the widow. If you've been listening to this serious review on Curse that I've been doing for the past few weeks, you would know that I'm really not a fan of those cartoon transitions that they have in the show. And this is one of the occasions when they do that. And it was a little bit frustrating because I wanted to know what happened. So they show how Morgana kills the widow and becomes the widow, but they show it in like a cartoon transition that leaves tons of unanswered questions. So I wasn't a fan of that. I really wish they would have just showed what happened. I mean, at first, I thought that maybe Morgana killed her with the Sword of Power. I mean, maybe that's what happened, but it's not clear. At least for me, it wasn't clear. So I wish they would elaborate on that. So hopefully on season 2, they will. Anyway, but that's what happens. When Morgana kills the widow, she then becomes the widow. And that's when she appears, later, a few moments later, she appears in front of Cardan out of thin air and provides the sword to Nimue. Now, an important part of these final scenes, or these final themes that are going on at the end of the show, is the final battle that the Fae find themselves in at episode 10. So right as the Fae were venturing over to the beach to catch the boats that Uther had provided, they are attacked by Cumber's army at the beach. I guess maybe they thought that Nimue was going to be there. So, Cumber wanted to kill Nimue so that she wouldn't be a threat to his reign anymore. maybe that was part of the deal that he struck with Cardin, where he was going to basically eliminate the Fae in exchange for the sword. It's really not clear, but nevertheless, they're there and they're there to kill Faes. And at first, it looks like all hope is lost, but then out of nowhere, the Red Spear shows up in her boats and starts helping the Fae. With the help of the Red Spear, the Fae survivors, Arthur included, are able to defeat Cumber's army. So it looks like a new alliance is formed between the Red Spear and the Fae in their fight against, the established powers of the land. In this case, specifically King Cumber. Now, and they don't show if the Fae are able to get on the boats and leave. Season 1 ends before this is brought to a close. So I guess in season 2 we will find out exactly what happens with the Fae afterwards. But we do know that there's a new alliance and a good relationship now between the Red Spear and the Fae. Now, the really important part of the show and the capstone to season 1 is back to Nimue and Morgana and Merlin escaping from the battle between Uther's army and the Cardin's army. As they're escaping, they cross this little bridge that crosses in front of a waterfall. It's like a land bridge. It doesn't look like a man-made bridge. And as they're crossing, we see our famous little psycho Iris pull out her bow and arrow and shoot Nimue. So Nimue gets 2 arrows to her body, and she falls over the side of the land bridge, and Merlin jumps and holds her by her arm, and it's a really heart moving, it's an emotional scene, because for the first time Nimue cries to him and says "Father," and her hands are covered in blood, so they're slippery, and she slips through Merlin's fingers and falls and out into the water, I guess, in the bottom. So then this brings us back to the beginning of the season. So the very first part of the season, on episode 1, we see Nimue floating in water with arrows sticking out of her body. So it looks like this is how that happened. One scene in all of the show that you should see, if you haven't seen more than once, just go and watch it, because it's the most badass scene in all of the show. It's when Merlin loses his shit after Nimue has potentially died falling over from the bridge they were crossing. So Merlin gets a hold of the sword and he starts chanting and saying, enchantment with the sword, and a fucking storm just breaks out of nowhere, and he loses his shit, and he basically becomes Thor. And lightning is just falling on the sword. It's coursing through his body. His eyes have turned into like lightning balls. It's really cool shit. And he harnesses all this power and he starts shooting lightning bolts and at all the paladins coming his way, and at that little fucking psycho Iris that just killed his daughter in his eyes. And eventually he does this other thing where he does some more enchantments, and now the electricity is like in his hands. It's pretty cool. He looks like one of the Sith from Star Wars, and he just starts shooting electricity out of his hands and just killing the paladins like it's nothing. Anyway, it's the most powerful thing that we've seen in the show so far, in my opinion. And it just really goes to show just how powerful Merlin really was when he had his magic. I mean, this is how he got his reputation, and this is how how he became, how he was able to achieve such fame and and such favor with the king, and become counsels to all the kings throughout history, in this world, because there was just nobody else like him. He was the most powerful, and he demonstrated that in this scene. At the end, he starts swirling like the sword over his head like a helicopter as he's hugging Morgana to get the fuck out of there, and basically they both are taken away in a lightning bolt. And that's it. That sums up Curse season 1. I gotta say, I love this show. It started off as a slow show, which steadily became better and better and better, and then out of nowhere, it just became super awesome. I got really invested in it, and every episode, I was just biting my nails. I just wanted to see what else would happen next. It's one of those shows. There's a little bit of everything for everybody, all sorts of characters and with different demeanors and different views on things, all sorts of different fake creatures, and a lot of parties. It's not always clear who's the good guy and who's the bad guy all the time in the series, and it's I don't know, it's something a little bit different, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna give this show 2 thumbs up. I really recommend it to anybody who's into fantasy, who's into magic, and well, it's not even pseudo historical, but it's it takes place in the medieval times, and I'm really into shit like that. So I really like Curse. Recommend it to anybody who likes stuff like this. And thank you for listening to this. So let's go ahead and wrap the show up, and we'll get working on the next one. Now, if you're not a Patreon yet, let me tell you about the best $3 you will spend in your life. So, as I mentioned before, for just $3 a month, you can become an entry-level binger for the show, and that earns you a shout-out on the show and access to the Patreon exclusive Midnight Binge podcast Discord server. So that server is already created. We have a few members on there already, and basically what it is a really cool invite-only private chat group where we can all get together and talk about the Netflix shows that we love. I've created different chat rooms in the Discord server so we can talk about different shows individually. It looks like it's going to be tons of fun once we get more people in there. So make sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in. And that's on the entry level tier. So that's the basic thing you get with a $3 tier. Now there are higher level tiers to choose from, which unlock tons of additional perks and exclusive access to new content. So as I mentioned, for just $2 more on the $5 tier, you can become an official binger, and that grants you access to the Midnight Movie Binge episodes, which are going to be a regular series where I review original Netflix films. Now, official bingers also get a virtual binger badge customized with your name for you to show off as a podcast supporter. I already sent out the first badge to our first Patreon, Autumn, and it came out super awesome. I have a picture of that up on Instagram if you want to take a look at that. And that's how the other badges are going to look as well. Finally, you will feel good knowing that you did, something good. You made a positive impact on the future of the show, and it really helps out just to cover the cost of creating, a podcast with all the hosting fees and all this other stuff. If you want more information on that, just make sure to visit us on patreon.com/midnightbinge for more information. The link is also available in the episode description for quick access. Now, if you're not ready to become a patron yet, there's a way you can support the show absolutely free. Simply leave the show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and tell a friend about the show. It really helps with getting visibility for new listeners on all platforms and getting the word out about the show so we can grow our audience. Now, if you're new to the show and you want to learn more, if this is your first time listening or whatnot, just make sure to visit our website. It's midnightbinge.com. There you can find everything about the show, including how to get your hands on some pretty cool merch.
Also, if you don't already, make sure to follow the show on Instagram at Midnight Binge Podcast and on Twitter at Midnight Binger. Drop me a message, say hi. I'm always talking with you guys there. I appreciate everybody who's providing me feedback on Instagram. Several of you have reached out and given me a lot of good ideas. So thank you guys for doing that. And that's it for today. So that's it, folks. Thanks for listening. Keep binging and catch you on the next one.